Aloha friends, it's Jake the Ashen Hollow. Today we're going to be talking about something that's been on people's minds since the dawn of time. Okay, well more maybe like the dawn of Dark Souls 3, but still. Alright, so let's talk about Yorshka, and more specifically her parents, or at least a parent, as I believe with as much certainty as you can get from Dark Souls lore that I can pinpoint one of her parents. It definitely isn't a secret. People have often thought that her father could be Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, but shrugged it off as religious talk when she speaks to you about Father Gwyn and Sister Gwynevere. Which, mind you, likely is religious talk, but that doesn't by any means rule out the possibility that Gwyn is actually her father, as there are a lot of inconsistencies in her dialogue that she lets slip, giving us more clues. So yes, I am quite confident that Gwyn is Yorshka's father both in the religious sense and in the Maury Povich sense. Of course, in Dark Souls 1 there are a few things that indicate to us that Gwyn only had 3 children. There's the DARKMOON Seance ring that says, "This ring is granted to adherents of Gwyndolin, DARKMOON deity and lastborn of Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight." And the ring of the Sun Princess, which says, "This ring is granted to those who enter a covenant with Gwynevere, daughter of Lord Gwyn and the Princess of Sunlight." So we learn that Gwyndolin is the lastborn of Gwyn, and that Gwynevere is simply referenced as Gwyn's daughter, not his middle daughter or oldest daughter, so it leaves little room for a 4th child. But it appears that the records have changed according to items in Dark Souls 3. It isn't really understood why they changed, perhaps after Gwyn had been gone long enough they changed the record, or perhaps once the truth was revealed about Yorshka they changed the records to match. But let's look at these items. The Sun Princess ring now reads, "Ring associated with Gwynevere, Princess of Sunlight and eldest daughter of Gwyn, the First Lord." And the DARKMOON ring now says, "Ring of the moon deity Gwyndolin, youngest son of Gwyn, the First Lord." So now we see that it labels Gwynevere as the eldest daughter of Lord Gwyn. Why the change? It is completely pointless unless now, of course, there is a younger daughter of Lord Gwyn. And Gwyndolin is now listed as the youngest son of Gwyn and no longer the lastborn. Those are some pretty huge and undeniable indicators that there is another child of Gwyn out there. Now that doesn't automatically point to that child being Yorshka, but we needed to tear down our preconceived notion that Gwyn only had 3 children before progressing further. Okay, so now let's look at Yorshka. Yorshka's chime reads, "A sacred chime belonging to Yorshka. Her brother, the former knight captain, presented her with this medium together with another gift, her name." So there are a couple things here. Of course, the obvious is that it refers to Gwyndolin as her brother. But could that be in the religious sense? Sure, it could, but I don't think so. I think the way it's worded points to the contrary. Her brother, the former knight captain. It would be more appropriate if written in the religious tone that it would say something like, "Brother Gwyndolin," or some shit like that, and not her brother, specifically hers. We also learn here that Gwyndolin is the one who gave her the name Yorshka, which is actually quite curious. Why hadn't she had a name? I can't say for sure, and I'll delve into my thoughts on this more specifically in a bit, but in short for now, I likely think if Gwyn himself had had a crossbreed child, the first thing he would probably do would be to hide the child away and not let anyone know of its existence. But again, more of my thoughts on this later. Let's read the description for the Miracle Darkmoon Blade. "Miracle of those who devoted themselves to the Darkmoon Covenant. Miracles of the Darkmoon are tales of revenge, but Captain Yorshka recites only for the sake of remembering her brother without knowledge of its meaning. Perhaps this is better, as revenge is better left to the blades." So here we see Gwyndolin again being referred to as Yorshka's brother. But here it seems very obviously brother isn't in the religious sense. In fact, the Darkmoon Blades and their religion isn't really known to Yorshka, and that she's only doing this in remembrance of her brother. That connection seems deeper than just a religious relationship, and again, it references Gwyndolin as brother informally. She even refers to Gwyndolin as her elder brother.
"The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwyndolin."
Which is again a bit informal to be in the religious sense. I would think to be in a religious tone, it would sound more like the Darkmoon Knights were once led by Brother Gwyndolin, but that's not how we're seeing it here, and Gwendolyn keeps being referred to as her brother and my brother. She is certainly referring to people in this religious sense when she talks, but she also does it informally, which I believe is a big indicator to them actually being her family as well. Let's listen to another piece of Yorshka's dialogue. We know that she does refer to Gwyn as Father Gwyn, which is in the religious tone, but listen to how she informally also calls Gwyn simply Father.
Long ago, our father Gwyn, lamenting the waning of the fire, became cinder of his own will. Now, the fire is linked by the champions who have come in his stead. Such is the will of Father and the gods. And so the Dark Moon Knights took arms to watch over those who link the fire.
Such is the will of Father. In this context, it is much more likely she's talking about her dad, right? Because here she isn't necessarily even talking about the Darkmoon Blades specifically. She's talking about the agreement of Gwyn and the gods that the fire should continue to be linked, and then mentions that the Darkmoon Blades took arms to defend those who would link the fire. She first mentions him in the religious sense by saying Father Gwyn. Or is it? She says our Father Gwyn, when in every other religious context she simply says Father Gwyn. I think in this instance she could be talking about herself, and Gwendolyn thus uses our Father. Then afterwards just goes to say, such is the will of Father and the gods. To me, that's pretty clear cut that she's speaking of her actual father and not just a religious head figure. So let's look at a couple other things that help tie her as a child of the royal family. First, let's read the dancer's crown. Crown worn by the dancer of the Boreal Valley. The mirage-like aurora veil is said to be an article of the old gods, permitted only for direct descendants of the old royal family. Who else is wearing something like the mirage-like aurora veil the dancer has donned? Oh, Yorshka, right? That's quite curious. Not as curious as George, mind you, but still quite damn curious. Then there is her frail appearance, which is not unlike Gwendolyn's. The last two born of Gwyn, possibly as his power waned, took its toll on his ability to bear children. Maybe. I guess that part isn't super important, but they seem to be the two closest siblings of Gwyn, so it's a little curious that they're both so frail. Okay, so now to wrap up, let's talk about Gwyn real quick, and perhaps how his actions got him here. So we know Yorshka is a crossbreed, obviously. So that would have to mean that if she is Gwyn's, that in some form or another he had to consort with a dragon, right? Now I still don't know if this means dudes are mounting dragons and shagging them. I'll be honest, I don't know how it all works. That would seem to be the answer I want to give you regarding the one biology class I took in high school, along with producing offspring of my own, but who knows, it could be different. But that part isn't important, just use your imaginations, you filthy animals. So back to Gwyn consorting with dragons. Why would he do this? Didn't he hate dragons and fight a huge war against them, etc., etc.? Yeah, he did, and so did his firstborn, eh? Yet we know now that his firstborn is quite in favor of the dragons. Now how can we be for certain that Gwyn wasn't starting to feel the same way before he linked the fire? What if him and his firstborn had come to the same conclusion, and they both had kept it a secret until whatever the firstborn did to reveal himself? It seems that even after Gwyn's death, him and his firstborn were actually quite close to one another, which wouldn't make a lot of sense if the firstborn was sneaking around his father's back, consorting with the enemy. The Sunlight Blade miracle says, miracle wielded by Lord Gwyn's firstborn. When the eldest son was stripped of his deific status, he left this on his father's coffin, perhaps as a final farewell. So the firstborn felt compelled to leave his father a farewell gift on his tomb upon leaving Anor Londo after his quote-unquote betrayal. To me, that seems indicative of a relationship between father and son that was still quite close, possibly through mutual agreements on things like, I don't know, fucking dragons. But I'm not sure, because to me I feel very sure that Yorshka is Gwyn's daughter, so he would have had to do something with dragons or a dragon. What we know is that Gwyn feared the dark more than anything, and was literally looking for anything to keep the fire alive. Perhaps towards the end, he sought out the dragons to learn of their immortality, and if he could, apply that to the first flame, and in the end ended up shooting his seed all over the damn place or some shit. I'm not quite certain. It seems a bit obvious that Gwyn was ashamed of Gwendolyn and Yorshka as children. Yorshka more so, obviously. We see statues of the royal family with the firstborn smashed out after he was removed from the annals of history, but there was never even a spot for Gwendolyn to begin with in any of these collages of statues. Yorshka would have likely been hidden somewhere, perhaps the painted world, but I can't be certain. That's just my guess. As we know, Yorshka was very lonely and even lacked a name until she finally met her brother Gwendolyn. Gwyn likely realized his mistake or saw that nothing came from his relationship with the dragons before coming up with the plan of lighting his own ass on fire to extend the Age of Fire. But of course, these are just my thoughts on the incredibly vague events of this damn game. We'll likely never know for certain, but for now, or until we do, this is what I believe, and I hope it was compelling enough for you as well. So thanks for watching, you dudes and dudettes. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are subbed, don't forget to click that little bell thing beside the sub button so that YouTube will actually show you when I friggin' upload a video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving that shit a like and chat with me in the comments. Follow me on Twitter for frequent updates on everything, and join the Discord server to chat with me at any time you'd like. If you ever considered supporting me further, I encourage you to check out my Patreon page. Of course, all these links are in the description, and you can find them on my homepage of the channel as well. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time.